Welcome back to a special split edition of our show on a Monday morning. What a nice way to start in Bottling, China, about 45 miles to the north of Beijing, and that beautiful view of the Great Wall of China. Over the years, there have been some real tall tales told about this structure. And of course, some are true, some aren't. So let's find out and separate fact from fiction. I'm here with David Spindler, who is a historian on the Great Wall. David, you look like Yao Ming. You're so big. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Why so much folklore about the Great Wall?
Well, I think it's what you just said. It's an impressive view. Whenever you see the structure, whether it's in person or in a picture, it's large, it's imposing, and then in your mind you extrapolate all over the span of northern China, and it seems really impressive and piques the imagination.
And because it's such a superhuman feat, you think there must be superhuman stories to go along with it. Let's start with some of the most commonly heard things about the Great Wall, David, and this one you've heard, I'm sure, 1,000 times, that from the moon, you can actually see the Great Wall of China. What's the truth?
Well, that's a very old story, well predating human space travel. It's much too far away to see from the moon.
However, I've heard people say from the space shuttle, astronauts orbiting have said they can see the Great Wall. So is that true?
That's right. If you're in an inner Earth orbit, in other words, not too far away from the Earth, and you know what to look for, you can pick out things like the Great Wall from space.
All right, there's another story, and I've heard this one. I've actually heard members of my own family repeat this one, that during the building of the Great Wall, in whatever century it was, that when a worker died, they didn't want to stop work and do anything like a proper burial. They would bury that person right in the wall. True or false?
Well, I think you need to go back and tell your family that there's no evidence for that.
None whatsoever?
No textual evidence, no archaeological
So how'd that story
evidence.
get started?
Well, it's a myth, and I think the myth does tell us something, which is that it reflects the resentment of the common people about being pressed into servitude to work on this wall project against their will.
Let's talk about the next one, okay, that this is one continuous wall. True or false?
False. We should really say the Great Walls of China. Pretty much every dynasty since about 500 BC built walls, not necessarily in the same place.
Which raises a question, David, because in that way, if it's several or if it's many different walls, how can they accurately measure it? Has it ever been measured? I used a figure in a story we aired just a few minutes ago. So are you going to tell me I blew it?
Well, you probably did. There's never been
a complete... You're supposed to be nice.
There's never been a complete survey of the wall. People are constantly discovering new sections of these walls. So we really just don't know how much is out there.
So I said 4,000 miles. Is that a commonly used estimate on the length of the wall or the walls?
I've heard all kinds of numbers. That's on the low end, but I have heard that before.
All right. And finally, there are a lot of people who say that this wall obviously was built to keep invaders out. And they actually say that it was a great failure. Was it a success or a failure?
It was a success, but it really depended on the people manning the wall. So, for example, here on October 21st, 1561, thousands of Mongols were attacking, but the Chinese army was prepared. They had their people in the right place and were able to fight off that attack. It's when the Chinese didn't know where these large attacks were happening that the Mongols were able to get through.
Is there enough of an effort, in your opinion, and it's just your opinion, but to preserve this wall and repair sections that have been damaged so that it is preserved for generations to come?
In many cases, there is. In the place that we're standing on now, it was restored in the 50s and then the 80s, and millions of people have seen this site, and such preservation efforts have taken place in other parts along the Great Wall. Well, but it's a huge structure, so it's hard to preserve it all.
It's a sensational structure. And David Spindler, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, and I'll tell that family member of mine that she was wrong, all right? Courtesy of you. We come back, we're going to have much more ahead from the Great Wall, from Beijing, and from New York City. But first, this is Today on NBC.